Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 3rd, 2019 City of Lebanon Planning and Zoning meeting. There's going to be a lot of people here. I see a lot of people here tonight, and one thing I need everybody to do, if you think you're going to talk, I need everybody to sign in at some point, especially before you leave. Other than that, we have 5 items tonight on the agenda. And I guess the first item, it will be a roll call. Kelly?
Okay. Gordon Perry, absent. Bruce Pauley,
Here?
Ron Edwards,
Here.
Chad Kiger,
Here.
and Lori Groves.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum tonight. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last month's meeting.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
That carries. Okay, we'll get right into to business. Docket number 19-14 is an Irving Materials request. It's a use variance approval to expand their concrete production facility proposed to be located at 3428 South Indianapolis Road. The property is zoned SF single family, and that would be out where, I guess it's right next door to the existing IMI concrete plant. Ben, would you take over?
Absolutely. Good evening, board members. I'll give you a little bit of background here and then walk through some of the elements of the staff report and answering questions you have. Just to start out with a little bit on the property, if they'll pull the screen up here. You see here, this is an aerial photography. Actually, this is 2019 aerial, so it's actually fairly recent. The area outlined in red is the existing IMI site that you see there. The subject property that's the consideration tonight is outlined in yellow. This is currently Earl's Garage. They have a tow yard and body shop and garage there. There's a number of different buildings and a number of different cars currently parked on the site. These are both non-residential uses, and then the site that's directly north of the site in yellow is also a non-residential use, and then you've got, looks like, a couple of homes to the north of there. Other than that, the immediate surroundings are all agricultural. As you go further south, there are some uses there as well that are not agricultural in nature. A little bit about the history out here. In May 1989, this property while it was under Boone County's jurisdiction, had actually been rezoned to an industrial zoning classification, in essence to allow what is out there currently. So for a period of time since 1989, it was zoned non-residential, in fact industrial in nature. When the city annexed this area in 2007, we put a blanket zoning on the entire annexation area of SF because there wasn't a proposal in place. So we put, in essence, kind of our default zoning on the entire area. So whereas before the annexation, it was a permitted, the body shop was a permitted use here. When we annexed it, we put it in a zoning district, created a non-conforming land use by doing so. So even though it was not residential in nature at the time, that's the default zoning we put on it. So we in essence created the situation where we created non-conforming use out of an industrial use. So the request for IMI tonight would be to purchase this property and expand their existing operation onto this site. I'll pull up here a little bit of their proposal. So this is the existing site. What they're showing here is that they would be removing all of the existing structures that you see here outlined in yellow. There's a couple buildings closer to the street, and then there's kind of these lean-tos back in the back here that you see. And then it would obviously be clearing out all that you see here, all the number of cars and junk that you see parked here. So this is the existing site, and they're basically going to scrape the entire site to remove everything there. And then what you see here on this next, this is fairly basic. What they're going to propose to put a pond in the back, and then they're going to be storing aggregate out here. So they're not proposing any structures on the property. They have no intentions to put any structures out here. They just want to expand so they have a little bit more storage area for some of the aggregate they're producing down there. So that's their general proposal. So the reason for the request is, we've got a non-conforming industrial use that's out there now. We rezone it to residential. They're essentially seeking to use it for an industrial use again. Rather than doing a permanent rezone to some sort of industrial zoning classification, we thought it was better to look at doing a use variance, which while permanent is more temporary in nature than a rezone would be, which the rezone would also allow other uses to potentially move there if IMI went away. So what we really want to do is put this zoning in place for IMI specifically, so that if anything came after it, it would come back before the board, so we wouldn't get a more intense industrial use than just a storage yard that you see here. So this is a use variance request to allow a concrete production facility expansion into the SF zoning district. Because it's a change of use, it does require review by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So just walking through some of the additional elements on the staff report. I will highlight a couple. I won't go through the entire findings of fact, but those are in the staff report for record, but I will highlight a couple of additional items. In particular, the comprehensive plan, which is one of the items that's the Board of Zoning Appeals expected to consider when looking at some sort of use variance, making sure that it's not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. In this case, this area all along Indianapolis Road is designated for mixed-use commercial industrial on the comprehensive plan. So the proposed land use fits right in with that comprehensive plan designation for non-residential uses. So this request would not interfere at all, really, and definitely does not interfere substantially with the comprehensive plan designation. So with that determination, the planning staff recommended approval of the variance of use request to permit a concrete production facility within the single-family SF zoning classification, subject to the following conditions. One, that the approval of the variance of use is limited to those concrete production facility uses proposed by the applicant. Any change in use or increase in the intensity of use by the current or any subsequent owners will require approval of the City of Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals. And we put this in here. I know we do this on every use variance. In this case, what they're requesting is storage and retention pond. So this approval is specifically for the uses they have proposed. If they come back and say, we're putting another production, more production equipment over there, or we're going to build a building, that's something that would increase the intensity of use, and we want to be able to have a chance to review that to make sure that's appropriate. So in this case, what they're requesting that you see on this plan right here, this aggregate storage and retention pond, that is the only thing they're getting approved for. The second condition, and looking at and reviewing the site, there is an existing privacy fence that runs along that north property line. It's in some states of disrepair, and so what we had actually requested was that they repair and maintain that privacy fence located along that north property line. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Ben? Thank you, sir. Is the petitioner here? Anybody from IMI here? Please come forward.
You'll need to come up to the podium, sir.
Yes,
Need
sir.
your name and address and just a little bit about what's happening.
My name's Mike LaGrange. My address is Fishers, Indiana, 11070 Lexi Lane. I oversee the operations in the Indianapolis metro area. Like was previously stated, we are looking to purchase the property adjoining our existing property to facilitate the aggregate storage and retention pond. There is quite a bit of low area in that area, in this lot area. So we want to take that drainage and put it into in a retention pond to contain it. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the ready mix operation that we currently have is will stay where it is at this, we're not looking to move it over there or build any structures.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Is there going to be the possibility of having a concrete washout on this property?
The property that we're purchasing will have storage area for material that we would crush there on our existing property and then store it on the property that we're looking to purchase.
But no true washout of the concrete trucks?
No, we're not looking to wash the trucks out on that property. We're looking to use it for, we get return concrete, as you obviously know, and we ribbon that, and you'll see that on our existing operation we have. And when we ribbon that out and it hardens, then we crush it, and this will allow us to put that crushed material, hardened concrete, crushed material on that site.
But you're not gonna bring any wet material in to clean out the truck on this property is what I'm,
We are not intending to put washout, and when I say use it for,
whatever's
dumping.
left over off of the so-and-so's job.
yeah, it's the concrete, I don't know a better way to explain it, but the concrete that comes back will ribbon out like a snake kind of effect, or a windrow. And you push up that hardened concrete and then you crush it. And it's just like, the concrete you have out here on your sidewalk or driveway or anything
Right.
like that. And then we need room to store that material. So that material gets stored over on the site that we're looking to purchase. Now, the water from the site and stuff, that will be collected in that retention pond. Because, rainwater and whatever is on the site, so we keep it retained on the site.
Okay. Any other questions? Ben, you have anything to add or anything? Okay. This is a public meeting. Anybody from the public wish to speak? Please come forward. Thank you.
It's William Pennington, 3310 South Indianapolis Road. My question is, what will be the hours of operation? I'm roughly probably 700 feet from that property line.
I want to come back up and answer that question. I don't know if anybody else is going to want to speak, but.
We don't intend to operate any different hours than what we're operating right now, sir.
Which is,
We'll run, there are times that we start 1 o'clock in the morning.
okay. Any other questions for him?
Is there going to be at any time an increased productivity from that location? Do you foresee any expansion as to plants on your existing property?
Well, I won't speak to
But
what
that,
we're gonna do on our
we're
existing.
talking two different things now. We can't get into the existing property.
Yeah. I mean, we are not looking to do anything different on this property other than store an aggregate and a retention.
And that would normally happen basically during regular business
Yeah,
hours.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna run a crusher at night to do that kind of work. Yeah. So what we do on our existing is the same as what we're doing now on this piece of property. Crushing would be during daylight hours, normal business hours.
Okay. Wait a minute, hold on. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now I need you to come up to the microphone, please.
Teresa Wilson, 3510 South Indianapolis Road. I'm on the other side of Lebanon Concrete, IMI.
That's all right.
I still don't understand your hours of operation.
Ma'am, we will run.
I need you to come a little closer to the microphone then.
We'll run the same hours that we are now. When those hours, but this particular piece of property, we're not gonna be running any abnormal hours, daylight hours is what we'll crush when we crush. And the crushing will more than likely,
Because that's
just
very
be
loud,
during
right?
the week.
That's loud.
I don't know what you call that.
I
But-
think that's going to be loud. I mean, we're in a home and that's gonna be loud. So,
Can I ask one question that might help you a little bit? This crushing is not an everyday occurrence,
No, sir. We
and
may
it might
do
not be an every week occurrence.
We do it a couple of times a year as a rule. It doesn't go on all the time.
well, we weren't notified of this meeting at all. In fact, our neighbor Gary told us Friday. So we didn't have any idea of this, and we live next door to you. So, you know, we didn't
Okay.
get no information on this at all.
How close do you live to,
Next door.
We were in the picture.
Yeah, we're in the picture. So we didn't know about this at all. So if he hadn't come over, we wouldn't know about this. You've been good neighbors, so,
Yeah, thank you.
you know, we really, what you're showing, what we see, doesn't seem like, I mean, I hate to see Earl go, but I think that doesn't look like it's gonna be bad. If you can just continue being good neighbors and have your drivers drive at a reasonable rate down the road so they don't just start screaming by the time they get to our house and put it in, you know, 5 gears, and remember that people are sleeping when they're going at 1 o'clock in the morning. I appreciate it, and,
Understood.
you know, that's just because, and that dust, you know, they're kicking up all that dust from the road and everything else too. It just kind of sucks you up. You know, these big trucks, they forget that people live there too. So, you know, we're still trying to be a neighborhood, as well as we know everything's turning industrial, and the city seems to want this to be industrial more than a neighborhood now. So that's where we are. So we're trying
Sure.
to live with that. And, you know, we'll never be able to sell our house probably now, so that's just where we are.
Yeah,
So,
understood.
we're trying to live together with all of that, so I'd really appreciate it, and,
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Neighbor.
you for being a good
Sure.
neighbor.
yeah, thank you.
Sue.
okay, do we have any other remonstrators?
I'm Gary Hayes. I live at 3720 South Indianapolis Road. So I'm the second house south, probably a tenth of a mile distant, and right across the street from the Weber facility that you approved last year. And a couple main concerns I have that I hope that you'll consider tonight for kind of a radical change in a non-conforming use in our area. I mean, we're talking about a very radical change when you scrape it off and start all over again. And a lot of times, I think in a non-conforming use, that kind of raises a flag. That means you need to go pretty slowly on a change like that. I think just the increased hours of operation will probably cause the plant to have more activity, and that brings my main concern up, and that's our groundwater supplies in the area. I know, I've heard it said several times that this is single family, and it's kind of presented like that was just an accident or maybe a fluke that it was zoned that way when we got annexed, but I think it was zoned that way probably because there's no municipal sewage or water down there. We don't have those things. And so really the only thing that you should be building down there are single-family homes. And I think your zoning rules make that pretty clear. So I know that you can change the rules to fit the situation, but a lot of the homes in my area are on shallow wells. Even homes that were built in the last 30 years there's a couple of them have bucket wells. Groundwater will be an issue if there's a lot of water pumped out of there. And I used to work at a concrete plant. I know that a fully loaded mixer, when it rolls out with 9.5 yards of concrete, it's got between 750 and 850 gallons of water in that load. You've also got a lot of water used for washout of the batch plant and the trucks. There is an existing washout lagoon on the property now. the presently occupied property. I think that'll probably have to be expanded if the hours of operation and the amount of material that goes out of there expands. The other thing, one more issue I want to bring up, I'll try to be as brief as I can. I've been accused of talking too much. But right now, the plant has a lot of lights on it that are unregulated. At night, if I look at the plant, I have 7 floodlights shining at my house. That's a big increase over what it's been in the past. There were no lights for the first 20 years I lived there. There's been 1 light for the last 10 years. It's very bright. It's a beacon. And I would hope that with a big radical change in a non-conforming use, that we could apply some of the light standards that are in place for an industrial zoning site to that area.
Okay.
On the water, Weber just drilled a well across the, from my house this year, so they're going to be on groundwater. This plant, which has got quite a bit bigger, is it's going to put a dent in the groundwater. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for letting
you.
me speak to that.
Anybody else care to speak? We will, yes, ma'am.
Hello. My name is Amanda Ripley, and I am an attorney at law. I represent White Orchid Group. We are located at 3358 South Indianapolis Road. We are the property that is directly adjacent to the property in question. I am here to object on behalf of my client because of multiple different reasons, some of which you've already heard from the residents around us, but I can elaborate in great detail. I also have a brief written up for your disposal, which will elaborate more than what I'm going to be able to explain today. But I will go ahead and give you these.
Thank you.
It was made only aware to us today the actual intended purpose of the property acquisition. We were led to believe, based on your public notice, that they were expanding the concrete production facility, not just a storage area and a retention pond. So that right there is a little questionable in my eyes. However, you guys, excuse me, IMI has asked for a use variance on an already legal non-conforming use. However, the use that they are asking for would cause the current non-conforming use to become more non-conforming. And based upon your zoning ordinance in Chapter 3.1C, a legal non-conforming use may only continue in the manner and to the extent that they existed or were used at the time the change in the UDO was enacted, provided that it does not, subsequent to the adoption of this ordinance, become more non-conforming. A concrete production facility, which is what has been asked for, is a increased non-conforming use. If you use the use matrix in Chapter 4.2 of your zoning ordinance, it states that a concrete production facility can only be a conditional use on an general industrial zoned property. This is, as you've already stated, a zoned single family, and therefore, whether it was originally grandfathered in to be an industrial use, a concrete production facility was not that intentional use. Excuse me. Since concrete production facility is a conditional use, we should use the same standards that you would if you were considering a conditional use of the property. Of those standards, in zoning ordinance, chapters 9.5, letter C, small d, that the use will not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring uses. Currently, all of the properties surrounding the property in question are zoned as single-family. For the most part, those are being used as single-home family residences. We would not want any additional, regardless of whether it's going to be expanded or not, we would not want the increased noise pollution, light pollution, water depletion, as well as air pollution that could be potentially caused by the allowance of this use variance. The noise pollution comes from the quantity of trucks. If in fact it would be a storage area, that means that more trucks would be coming in and out with concrete, or whether it be production materials or actual end result product. That number of trucks obviously causes a lot of noise, as already stated by the neighbors, that they do hear those trucks at all hours of the day. Light pollution, as already indicated by Mr. Haynes, comes from the spotlights. An increased area would, right now, as it stands, the property in question actually acts as a buffer to the properties to the north, which includes my clients. By increasing their area and granting this use variance, you've eliminated that buffer, and therefore the light pollution will be increased as well, whether they increase the amount of lights or not. As already stated, the water pollution is a potential risk. Namely, there is a legal county drain that sits at the end of my property, my client's property, I apologize, known as the Berryman County Legal Drain. This is 30 feet from the property in question. In Indiana Code, 36-9-27-33, the right of entry and upon land lying over 75 feet of any regulated drain cannot be occupied. If the IMI is asking for a retention pond, and it appears as though, based on the plot that I'm looking at here, I know you guys can't see it on your screen, but it would be within 75 feet of that legal drain. So that is a question. In addition, there has been no documentation with IDEM, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, about a retention pond, which would require a liner, as well as confirmation that no contaminants would leach into the groundwater, nor into stormwater, nor into well water, as all of the homes around the property in question do have wells, as already stated. As we know, as IMI has already said, their intent is to completely remove everything from the property in question. This is a topographical change. If you were to look at an aerial view and how the actual water drains from the surrounding properties, everything drains to the back of my property, my client's property. That would include the property in question. By causing everything to be removed from it, you're only causing that water to drain that much faster to that county drain, as well as then into the public waterway and water system. If you are going to approve this use variance, I would ask that you add additional restrictions to the restrictions that were already to be placed. I would request a phase 2 soil investigation be done to determine if there are currently any contaminants existing on the property prior to expansion. I would ask for a comfort letter from the Brown Fields Program of the United States Environmental Protection Agency in association with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. I would also ask that a permit be made under the Federal Clean Water Act, which is known as the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. All of this would be applicable to a retention pond. Another issue that would be hazardous to the neighbors is the air pollution. Obviously, if they are doing concrete crushing, that causes concrete dust to be emitted into the air. Even though the property in question would only be aggregate storage and stockpiling, you cannot say that there would not be dust that would accumulate as a result of that. That would obviously affect those around the property in question that much more. In addition, you are devaluing the property as it stands by eliminating everything on it. The property has buildings on it. Those are part of the property value. That does decrease your tax base, by removing those buildings. In addition, if there were additional trucks to be bringing in and out for this aggregate storage area, that increases the wear and tear on the roads that go, the one road, South Indianapolis Road, that goes in and out of this property. You are looking at an increased risk of county money having to be spent to repair that road from the truck usage. These are currently the objections that I have. As I've stated, the letter that I've given you is much more in detail. It explains it finitely. But I would just ask that you please do not grant this use variance, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Anybody else? We will close the public end of the meeting. Ben, you want to come back and address any of the issues?
I did want to ask one question of the applicant. Are you crushing now, this operation you're talking about? Do you crush at this site now?
On our existing site, we do crush.
Now, will the actual activity of crushings take place in that same location? Are you just storing the material on this site? The actual crushing will take place in the same spot it is now?
I hadn't thought through it to really answer that question honestly.
Okay.
It can be done that way. As far as if that's one of the requirements, we can keep the crushing operation on the existing site. Because mainly, I mean, what we're really wanting to do is use the stockpiling and stuff on the site we are looking to purchase. So it can be done that way.
Just to kind of address, or maybe even ask some additional questions, I know there was some mention of lighting. Our office has not received any complaints about the lighting up to this point, but we'd be happy to review it out there on site. They're required to meet all the same lighting regulations of any other development that would come to the city of Lebanon. So if there are lights that don't meet our light standards, we'd be happy to go out there and review those and make sure we get those shielded appropriately so they're not shining on the neighboring properties in an adverse manner. I'm sorry? Okay. Well, we'll review it because I said we've never received any calls of our office with any complaints about lighting at this point, or we would address it already, but we'd be happy to do that. So that's something we can take care of. In terms of, I know there were some questions about drainage and things like that. If they're going to outlet this pond to the county drain, they're going to have to go through all of the drainage requirements for the county. So they're not allowed to just build a pond and connect to some sort of tile or drain without going through the county's process. So that's something that they would still be required to do if that was the intention. So that is not a process that we're part of. That's all through the county drainage board. So that's something they would still be required to do. Obviously, I just got this same letter you guys did, so I haven't had a chance to read all of it.
Has everybody been notified? I mean,
We did, and so it's only 300 feet around the property, so even though somebody may be a couple properties away, they're large properties out here, so the 300 feet doesn't go very far. But that's what we're required to do by state law, so even though somebody may have been in that picture, they may not have got a notice because they're outside 300 feet from the property boundary. But we do notices for everybody within 300 feet, and then we put a notice in the paper also. See if there's anything else that I would need to address now quickly that I can. In terms of, there was some conversation about grandfathered uses or legally existing non-conforming uses and the grandfathering status. They're not asking to extend the grandfathered status of this use, which would be when the creating a more intensive non-conforming use would come into play. That would be something that we permitted as the grandfathered use. So what they're asking for is a use variance. So they're essentially attempting to eliminate the legally existing non-conforming status by requesting the use variance tonight. So just want to make sure we clarify that. In terms of IDEM permitting and those other things, those are not things that are part of our control. I'm not sure, unless the attorney has a different interpretation, whether we can require processes that would be another regulatory agency
I'm not aware of that ability
Okay.
at this time.
So if there's an MPDS, DES permit required, that's something that agency would regulate. If there's IDEM permitting required, I'm not sure that just a standard detention pond is required to go through all those environmental agencies. It's only if they were doing washout and some of the other industrial processes into that detention facility that those would come into play that I'm aware of. But those are all regulated by those agencies, not locally by the city of Lebanon. So I think I've addressed what I can. Obviously, I got 5 pages handed to me just now, but I can review those additional detail and see whether there's anything else we need to address. But in terms of conditions, I'm not sure that there's any other conditions, other than unless you wanted to make a condition that we review the lighting on the site to make sure we're addressing any concerns there. But again, that's a UDO requirement anyway, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a condition. We need to do that anyway.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for Ben? Thank you. Any discussion amongst us?
I don't think so.
Okay. That, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Make a motion to approve docket 19-14 with the 2 staff recommendations plus the lighting for the area.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Kelly?
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards.
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
No.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4-1, or 3-1. Good luck with your endeavor. Next item on the docket is 1915, Charles and Carrie Tallman. The property is located at 423 North Park Street in Lebanon. Property is zoned single-family residential and comprised of approximately .17 acres. The subject lot configuration is 60 feet wide and 120 feet deep. Ben, would you like to add anything to that?
All right. This is a fairly straightforward variance request, if there's anything that's really straightforward. This is an existing single-family home with an existing carport. And if they pull up the screen here for me, you can kind of get an idea of the existing site conditions out here. As you see here, the house is kind of the main part of the house is this structure here, and as you can see, this piece here to the south is the carport. I will say that the aerial photography, as opposed to the site plane or the lot lines on here, is not 100% accurate. So while it looks here that the carport is actually across the property line, I can assure you it is not, because they have also provided a survey to us that shows where the existing carport is located. I'll have to zoom in because it's really small. So this shows you via survey of the existing site. So you can see the carport a little bit better here. It's approximately 2.5 feet from the property line. It is an existing carport. Understanding from the applicant is this carport's not in very good shape and needs to be replaced. So in this instance, if they were just doing some basic repairs to it, they'd be allowed to do that under their legally existing non-conforming status. Because they're removing it and replacing it, the UDO would say they'd have to meet all of our development standards, which would require this to be 10 feet from the property line for an accessory use on the site. So because of that, basically wiping out the existing non-conforming status, they're starting over from scratch, and it requires a variance now to basically put a new carport back in the same place where the old carport exists. So that, in essence, is a request here, is they're basically replacing the existing carport on the same footprint, same setback that the current carport is from the property line, but because they're completely replacing it, it requires to come in for the variance for the setbacks. Just for the record, there are findings of fact in the staff report that address the 3 criteria for any variance request. And based on those elements, Planning staff has recommended approval of the variance to permit construction of an accessory structure that does not meet the side setback requirement. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions for Ben?
Nothing's changing except they're building new. correct?
Nothing's changed, and the footprint will remain essentially the same. It'll have the same setback it does now. It's just that the structure's to the point where it needs to be totally replaced.
Thank you, sir. Would Mr. Tallman or Mrs. Tallman step forward, please?
Charles Tallman, 423 North Park Street. He summed it up pretty good. The only thing I can add is the carport's gone. It's raised. We did that over the past 2 weekends, and we're just ready to start construction if you guys permit it. That's all. It's down. Dumpster was taken out today. Like he said, we just want to keep the same footprint and just make it better. That's all I got.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any public meeting, anybody care to step forward? Okay, we'll close the public end of the meeting. Take it you don't have anything else to say, Ben? Okay. Well, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve docket 1915, approval of development standards various to permit the construction of accessory structure that is 2 feet 6 inches from the side property line.
I would second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second.
Bruce Polly,
Abstain?
Ron Edwards,
Yes, aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-0. Thank you very much. Good luck, and hope everything goes right.
Ben, that door needs to be open for a public meeting.
I don't think we can open it back up.
Okay, we're to docket number 19-16, property at 720 Indianapolis Avenue here in Lebanon. The subject property is zoned general industrial and comprised of approximately 0.13 acres. The subject lot configures at 40 feet wide, 139 feet deep. Ben?
Again, this is another, I guess, if there's straightforward variance requests, this is another one that's fairly straightforward. This is let's see if I can give you an idea. So this is another zoning situation here. We've got an existing single-family home that's been single-family home for a long time, and the intention is for it to remain a single-family home. Just happens to be in a general industrial zoning classification, so it's something that's a legal existing non-conforming use. The reason it's showing up here tonight is not because they're requesting to change it or add it or remove it or anything like that. It's merely because the homeowner is intending to sell this, and the bank is suggesting that it's a non-conforming use, so they're not going to give a loan to the prospective buyer. That comes in a lot of cases if the buyer is looking to do an FHA, federally backed loan. Anything that's federally backed, they usually have some additional requirements, and one of them being that it's in a zoning district that permits the use. So that's the situation here, is that the bank won't approve the loan because of the zoning on the property. It doesn't support the use that's there. So the intention is not to change anything about how this property is used now or in the future. This is merely a use variance to essentially allow the house that's there to remain there so that they can close on this sale. So that's the need for the use variance. We did look at whether it made more sense to do a rezone, and it doesn't necessarily make sense here because of the zoning around it. Probably makes more sense for planning staff to look at doing a wholesale rezone once the comprehensive plan is done. If the comprehensive plan suggests a different land use than industrial in this area, if we want this to be a commercial or something other than industrial, use in this area, residential or otherwise, we should take a look at that and do a larger rezone of the entire corridor to make that happen. But, so in this case, to facilitate the sale of the house and continuing of the home that's there, we suggested that they get a use variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that's the request here tonight. For the record, there are findings of fact the staff has provided in the staff report in support of the request. The one thing I will highlight, though, criteria number 5 is approval won't interfere substantially with the Lebanon Comprehensive Plan. The Comprehensive Plan actually right now designates this property for commercial uses. I'm not sure how it'd be kind of challenging to use this for a commercial use on the property unless you use the existing home. So it's not necessarily significantly inconsistent. If they were planning to develop a residential neighborhood with 50 lots in it, that would be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and substantially interfere. Just to allow this home to continue to be used does not substantially interfere in my mind, even though the comprehensive plan designation doesn't suggest residential. So I think we're okay there. With that, staff has recommended approval of the variance of use to permit a single-family residential use within the general industrial zoning classification. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ben? Okay, thank you, Ben. Is Mr. Williams here?
Yes. Yeah, I'm Tim Williams representing 720 property. Just a request to go from commercial back to residential so they can fine young couple can make it a home, so.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing again. Anybody care to speak tonight? We will close the public end of the hearing. Discussion?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. I think I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve docket 1916.
Need a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second?
Bruce Polly,
Yes.
Ron Edwards,
Yes.
Chad Kiger,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 4-0. Congratulations. Good luck. That went so quick, I've lost my place.
1918.
Yeah. Okay. Next item on the docket is 1918, U.S. Cold Storage requesting a development standard variance for a front setback to allow construction of an accessory structure. Property is located at 415 South Mount Zion Road here in Lebanon Business Park. The property is zoned planned business industrial. Ben.
All right. U.S. Cold Storage approached us, actually their contractor did, about installing an accessory structure on the property. It's a small, I say small, it's small for the size of the property, 1,200 square foot accessory structure for storage that they'd like to put on the property. And they're in a unique situation here, again, because they're on a corner lot. You can see here, this is their existing property. They're on a corner lot, they have 2 frontages, which means that they've got a significant amount of front yard because of those 2 frontages. And the accessory structure requirement says it can be no closer to any front yard or any street than the existing structure. So in essence, you draw a line here along this property line and here along this property line, which means all this area is totally off limits for accessory structures according to our UDO, which leaves only this corner of the property back here for accessory structures. The challenge here is that they've got, if you look at the master plan for their site, they intend to continue to expand the building on this part of the property, so it would make sense for us to temporarily have them put an accessory structure here that at some point would need to be removed. So what they're proposing is in essence to put the building about right here on the property, and it's pretty small. I'll pull up the site plan here in a second so you can see what we're talking about in terms of size and location. Again, I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see it a little bit better. So you can kind of get an idea of the scale of that big property. Looking at the big building, here's the small little 1,200 square foot accessory structure sit here right on the edge of the parking lot. It's still over 300 feet, if I'm not mistaken, away from the property line to the west. So it's significantly off the road. So even though it is located in the front yard of the building, it is still significantly off the road, and they have a fairly extensive landscape buffer that's out here on Edwards Drive that screens it from the street. So that is the request here, is relief from that front yard setback requirement for accessory structures to allow them to essentially place it in the front yard along Edwards Drive in front of their building. For the record, there are findings of fact located in the staff report. And given the situation they're in with how they intend to expand their building into the area where accessory structures are the only place where they're permitted based on the way their property is situated, they do have a hardship here. And we have recommended approval of the variance to permit relief from the accessory structure front setback requirements, subject to one condition, that the accessory structure is painted in a color or colors that matches those of the primary structure. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think I'm fine. How about you people? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The applicant here?
My name is Adam Ashley. I'm the manager of the facility. I live at 829 Burgess Hill Pass in Westfield, Indiana. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this structure.
I guess the only question I have is this going to be basically a pole barn?
Yeah, you could say it is that. It's going to be a much nicer pole barn. Obviously, the colors are going to match our current facility, red, white, blue. And in addition to the landscaping out on the road, we are going to put additional landscaping around this on the west side of the building. So it'll be very similar to that
Okay.
pole barn.
Anybody else? Thank you, sir.
Questions? Thank you.
Public meeting, so anybody can speak. Nobody wants to speak, we'll close the public meeting. Comments or questions amongst the board? And a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve docket 1918, U.S. Cold Storage, applying for the variance to put up a 1,200-foot accessory structure.
Second.
I would second.
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Chet Kiger,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Motion passes. Congratulations. Good luck. Okay, now we're down to our last item tonight, which is docket 1919. Jeff Mayer for Culver's Restaurant. The property is located at 2454 North Lebanon Street, which is the former Bob Evans Restaurant. The property is zoned planned business, commercial, and it's within the thoroughfare overlay district and comprised of just over an acre, 1.04 acres. And requesting 5 variances. Ben?
All right. This will take a little bit longer because we've got a couple more requests associated with this one, but I think this is a pretty exciting project for the community. Mr. Meyer has purchased this property, actually purchased it last fall, and has gone through a number of months evaluating the site to figure out the best course of action, essentially looking to see whether it made more sense for him to try to remodel and add on to the existing Bob Evans restaurant structure, or scrape that building off the site and start over with a brand-new Culver's building. And ultimately, a couple months ago, I think he decided that it made more sense, even though it was going to cost him a little bit more money, to just go ahead and scrape that existing building from the site and build a new structure. In doing so, and I guess maybe before I say that, that's really the major change. I think the limits of the parking area are all staying the same. They're not changing any other, I think they're changing the location of the dumpster. They're going to move the location of the dumpster. Other than that, the parking area, the site area is primarily remaining the same, at least the hardscape of the site. Really, it's just that they're scraping the building. Because they're scraping the building and building new, that's a significant change to the property, which would require the entire site to be brought up to the current UDO standards. The challenge there is that would essentially eliminate the possibility for them to use the site because they don't meet any of the setbacks, and they'd be restricted so much by the additional setbacks or buffer yards that they really wouldn't be able to use the site in the manner that they need to. If they pull the screen up, you can kind of see here, I'll kind of go over, this kind of gives you an idea of, on the left here is the existing site. You see hashed out here, this is the existing building that's going to be removed. As you can see here, the parking limits are essentially staying the same. They are removing some of the striping so they can reconfigure. On the right here, you see the new building footprint, and of course, Bob Evans doesn't have a drive-through, Culver's does, so that's another significant change to the site that really kind of just barely squeezes in. So you can see here they've got the drive-through lane that goes around the building here and is on the west side. They have made this one way around the building just so they can get enough space for the drive-through lane and a passing lane, a bypass lane to get around. So they did make these angled parking spaces around the north side of the building to make sure they all fit with all these with the drive-through lane. So it is for them. This is a relatively small site for them to be able to fit what they would typically like to see, but they were able to make it work and meet all our parking requirements and all that good stuff. So this kind of gives you an idea, generally speaking, how this site's going to lay out, and I'll show you a little bit more detail of how they're going to use the site. And we'll zoom in here on the landscape plan. So the one thing that, of those that are familiar with the Bob Evans restaurant, what they'll notice is primarily missing from this site is landscaping. There really is very little, if no, perimeter landscaping. Mr. Meyer, the applicant, indicated early on that that was not going to be the case as we move forward. And it's a little bit hard to see here with the colors that they've used, but they are adding significant both tree and shrub and perennials and annual landscaping around the entire perimeter of the parking area that you see here, in essence meeting our perimeter parking lot landscaping requirements. They are doing significant building-based landscaping where they can, where they've got some room to do it, where there's not a drive-through lane. So they are significantly improving the site from what it is now. They're just not changing the edges of the parking areas. So because of those things, there's a couple things that they needed to request to be able to allow them to use the existing parking area. The first is the corridor buffer. So Lebanon Street, North Lebanon Street is a main thoroughfare in our community, and as such, this is in the Thoroughfare Overlay District. The Thoroughfare Overlay District, in addition to the 10-foot parking setback, which is here on this site now, would also require an additional 20-foot buffer yard for a 30-foot setback from the road before you could start a parking lot. The existing parking area is about 10 feet from the lot line, the property line, so it makes it kind of difficult for them to make this site work if having to cut down an additional 20 feet of this site. So they're really essentially asking us to waive that buffer requirement to allow them to use the existing parking lot extents that you see here. As I mentioned already, they are adding significant landscaping along that frontage that you see represented here in the landscape plan. So they're adding the landscaping. They're just asking us to waive that additional 20-foot buffer setback requirement. The second one is lot coverage. We require a maximum lot coverage of 75%. The existing site is right around 80% with a couple of decimal places after it. If you really get into it, after completion of the project, they will actually slightly improve that lot coverage, but not get to the 75%. So again, they're essentially asking us to allow them to use the existing site the way it sits and allow them to relieve from that lot coverage requirement to maintain that existing about 80% lot coverage that you see here on the site. The third one is lighting intensity. And I'll let them discuss this a little bit too, because we had some discussion about this. So part of their challenges here, and I'll let them kind of go into additional detail about that here in a second, is looking at what they feel, and that Mr. Meyer has done several Culver's restaurants. This is not his first go, and what he's discovered is his patrons after dark, there's a certain level of lighting that they like to see on that site in order to feel safe. And what they did in looking at this site is they're going to use LED lighting, which allows them to be very directional in nature. But one of their challenges is the fact that with the setbacks, the way you see them, for the parking lot, the parking edge of parking in some cases is only 5 feet from the property line, and at most 10. So even with shielding, it's hard to get down to 0.5 foot candles at the property line and allow them to have the lighting that they prefer to see for safety in their parking lot for patrons coming after dark. So as you can see here, what they did show us, while at the property lines, you're going to see some levels that are higher, and keep in mind, these levels you see here that are 14 are in the parking area. The property line is actually somewhere in here where I've got the hand now. For some reason, lighting contractors always remove the lot lines. It makes it more challenging for us to be able to interpret. So that you will see some light levels that are still 2-3 foot candles at the property line, but what they did want to show here is that by the time those lighting levels reach the edge of the road, as you can see here, the light is essentially 0 or just slightly above 0. So they're getting them as low as they can by the time it really gets to an area where somebody might be impacted by it. I think the highest you get is 0.3 on this north line, only because that parking lot's 5 feet from the edge there. So it was really hard for them to shield them to the point to get it down. They did have their lighting contractor go out there and take some ambient lighting measurements from other uses around them, and they were getting measurements at 2 and 3 foot candles standing out by the road from light that's already out there. So if these lighting levels are getting down to 0.5 at the property line, they're actually, the ambient lighting is going to be higher than that in this area just from the other uses around them. If you're familiar with this area, it's commercial all the way around them, including a 4-lane road that's directly east of them. So the lighting levels that are coming from the other uses will probably be higher than some of the levels you see at the edge of their property. So they have requested relief from that to allow them to increase their lighting intensity on the site to provide the safe lighting that they prefer to provide in their parking area. Number 4, lot plannings. I already mentioned this to some extent. In the thoroughfare overlay district, they're required to provide a minimum 5-foot landscape planting area around the building base. Is everybody seeing the elevation scroll past before I get back to the landscape plan? As you can see in the brief scroll, they are providing a very attractive building for us here that meets all of our requirements from architecture. So we, as I said, we require around 75% of the perimeter. They're essentially providing it around 50%, which is about the same as what was there with the Bob Evans restaurant. The challenge for them is really to be able to accommodate the pedestrian access around the building and the drive-through. They're just not able to quite get to that 75%. They have provided significantly more than a 5-foot buffer on the north and west sides of the building with quite a bit of landscaping to really beef that up as much as possible. But it's just a challenge for them with the somewhat restricted site for them and the larger building footprint, because this building is actually larger than the Bob Evans restaurant. So by expanding that footprint out, they're just challenged to be able to add that additional landscaping and still get that drive-through around the building with enough space for all the parking and all that good stuff that's required in the building. So they have requested relief from that lot planning requirement to allow them to reduce from the 75 down to about 50% of the building perimeter. The final one is sign type. This is another legally existing non-conforming discussion, just like we've had a couple of times already tonight. Let me go find the signs here toward the ends of this. Here we go. The final request is for the sign. As you can see in the small photo on here, there's existing, what would be defined in our ordinance, a pole sign for Bob Evans that's out there on the site. It is a legally existing non-conforming sign type because we don't permit pole signs anywhere but within 1,000 feet of an interstate interchange. So throughout the course of history along Lebanon Street, we've allowed a number of pole signs, or a number of them out there already, as there is here on Bob Evans, but since the ordinance changed about 10 or 12 years ago, we no longer allow pole signs. So this was, while Bob Evans was an operationally legally existing non-conforming sign on the site. When that use ceased operations and it became vacant, that sign lost its non-conforming, illegally existing status and became a non-conforming structure. So in order for Culver's essentially to reuse that structure and put a Culver's pole sign out there, they need to request the variance from you guys to allow a pole sign on the site. So in essence, they're using the same foundation, the same structure, they're just putting a Culver's branded pole sign in its place that you see represented here. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit on the image to the bottom so we can get a better look at it. That's what you see here. It's what a sign like this, at least the same information you see about every Culver's location. They've got their sign plus their flavor of the day on the sign that you see there. So that's the last request, essentially to allow them to reuse the existing pole sign that is on the site for a Culver sign that you see here. And I'm sure they'll be able to elaborate a little bit, but this was a large issue of discussion with Culver's corporate, and they were looking at approving this location for a franchise. Was discussion about signage, so I'll let them go into that further and the reason why they've made this request.
And the square footage does work for the sign?
It does. So if as a pole sign, they're permitted a larger square footages than if it was just a ground sign. So by allowing the pole sign type, you're allowing them to use the revised standards, or the standards for a pole sign as opposed to a ground sign.
Just, I guess for curiosity, is there a max for a pole
I
sign?
believe pole sign's 200 square feet or 300 square feet. So I don't, apologize, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's much
That's
larger
fine.
than this 50 square feet proposed.
Okay.
With that, I'll just make reference again for the record to the findings of fact that are located in the staff report, because I don't think anybody wants me to read them for the next half an hour. And then going through each of the variance requests, I'm trying to, let me double check and make sure there weren't any conditions placed on any of them. I do not believe there were, but let me make sure. Staff has recommended approval of all 5 variance requests in the staff report, and there are no conditions placed on those. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The applicant, step forward, please. Do you have anything you'd like to add or discuss or anything?
Good evening. First, thank you for giving us the opportunity to consider these variances. My name is Neil Miller. I'm Jeff Meyer's business partner. Have been for 16 years, so I've done all the ventures with him. Ben did an excellent job kind of going over everything. I just wanted to touch on each one of them as well. The corridor buffer variance request, just from our point of view, we kind of needed as much parking as possible using the same footprint. It was a big blow to us to not be able to use that same building, certainly a couple $100,000 blow to us, but we still want to be a big part of the Lebanon community. We're in several communities now. This would be number 10 for us. So I feel like we've got a good game plan going. We're in good with all the communities and seem to be doing very well, and building a great support staff underneath us to be able to do that correctly. But anyway, we do several fundraisers, and so, you know, the maximum amount of parking we could is certainly needed. Also, Culver's is a little bit different animal as compared to some of our competitors. We're built for, we have TVs in there, so whether there's a game on or a race on or something, our seats are cushioned. We keep our dining room temperature 73 degrees year round. We're not kind of that in and out tactic that some of our competitors use. We like our guests to that be the gathering place, that be the place to go, as well as kids after school and stuff. It's a safe, fun environment we try to create. We staff our stores for success. We pay very well, and so we've got a good track record of retaining team members. And so with the amount of team members that we intend to employ, that takes parking as well. So all this kind of factors into the setback request. The second one was the kind of the same exact thing. The reason would be the parking and kind of the need for that variance. The third is the lighting intensity. Ben touched on this a little bit. We get several comments from mothers and those soccer moms that come in there, and at night, it makes them feel better. The team, when they walk out during the summer, we close at 11 o'clock, and so by the time we close, it's midnight, and it truly is a safety thing. We have plans where we all walk out together. We'll have 4 closers, and they do walk out together. So, but walking out together when it is lit, and we do spend the extra money to upgrade to the LED as been proposed, so we can have some control on where it ends off. And you guys, I'm more than welcome to name off some of our locations if you guys wanted to go check out. Because we all have LED at all of our locations, and we do get a lot of comments on just the safety. Now, we're certainly not proposing like a car dealership or anything, how they really light up the world, but a little bit for the safety. is absolutely the biggest reason why we do that. The lot plantings has been discussed overall, in the overall project. I think will more than exceed the expectation. It's just maybe not in the placement of the new UDO. I have the benefit of being a business partner with Jeff Meyer, who owns a sod farm and a landscaping company, so we never short on that stuff. The intention is to always be the best on the block. We want to look the best on the block and keep it maintained, and that's just kind of our reputation that we believe in, and not just for UDOs and everything else, for our personal satisfaction of wanting to look the best. And then lastly, the sign type. Again, Ben did an excellent job at kind of explaining this. It is, what Culver's Corporate does is they look at each demographic and kind of, they've been in business for 36, 37 years, and so they know what works and what doesn't for Culver's. And I'm sure a lot of concepts out there will, we're different and everything else. I'm not going to stand up here and say that we're totally different than any other concepts, but there are some things that, with the landscaping package, with the size caliper trees that we want to put in there, we're not looking at little shrubs in 10 years from now that this will change. But the importance of displaying the flavor today at a level is critical to us. I would compare it to a gas station being able to advertise their gas prices. It's that important. We have people that literally log into Culver's and see what flavor of the day, maybe their neighboring one, and none of them all of them are different. And so they get to choose which one they go to. And so a guest driving by, chocolate covered strawberry, that sounds good. So it is crucial to make us a destination place and pull in to where we can make them a fan. Again, I appreciate the opportunity for you guys to consider this, and I can answer any questions you might have.
I have a couple questions for you. First, the sign. Do you have any ground signs in use anywhere?
We have one in Powell, Ohio. And to be honest with you, I wish I could provide you some pictures, and I apologize, I didn't bring those. But with the shrubs, it really eliminates when you're up on it. If you don't know it's there, you won't. I promise I'm not making this stuff up. I work shoulder to shoulder with the people, so I'll run drive through occasionally, and just so I can stay in touch. But they'll ask, "What is your flavor of the day?" So I mean, it's that critical to where. And we have digital signs where you're getting away from that changeable copy to where people unfortunately can come by and change the lettering and your misspellings and everything else, where this kind of eliminates that. It's very professional. It's not flashing. It's not drawing your attention. It's literally just the flavor of the day, and it stands out, and it really helps our business.
So it's a digital sign?
Yes.
Does that require a variance too, Ben? No, not in this zone. Second question, how are you going to take delivery?
We use Gordon's Food Service. They make 2 deliveries a week. They kind of determine per opening what days of the week.
I noticed that the rear door is facing south. So is that truck it's already a pretty tight site in terms of traffic movement? Mm-hmm. And so are those deliveries going to be made in the middle of the night, during the day? How are you going to work that, just out of curiosity?
Our requirements are either a key drop, and we don't get to decide that, unfortunately, because I would certainly request 8 a.m. delivery every time, every location, but I don't necessarily get to make that call. So they're not allowed to do it during peak business hours. They're not allowed to be on the lot between 11 and 2 p.m. and I think it's 4:30 to 7:30. So there are restrictions that Culver's has negotiated that they're not allowed to be on the lot during peak times. But those are usually the 2 options that we have. We have a few restaurants that are a key drop. They'll show up at 2 or 3 in the morning. They have a key to the building, an alarm code. They'll go in. It's unfortunate to us because we walk into our cooler to stacks of boxes that we have to put on our shelves, but we have to have product. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any public comment? It's open to the public. Okay, we'll close the public comment.
We cleared the public out.
Lauren's
Yeah.
not speaking today.
When's the opening?
It's a public comment.
You guys treat me well. We look to put it out to, the plans are finalized. We look to bid it out. That typically takes 30, 40 days for us to choose a general contractor. And then we're looking at a 120-day build. So realistically, end of September, October. Yep. I appreciate, giving me the opportunity to thank Ben and Mayor Gentry. You guys have been excellent, very welcoming. I think it's going to be a great relationship. We're very excited to be a part of it.
We are too.
We are, absolutely.
Okay, it's a yes vote or a no vote. I need a motion one way or the other.
Make a motion, 1919, approve all 5 variances.
Second the motion.
Okay, have a motion and a second.
Holly,
Aye?
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations. I guess unless there's any questions or comments or discussion, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Wait a minute, before we do that, the next meeting is July the 1st. Monday, July the 1st. Okay, now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second the motion.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Everybody have a good evening. The meeting is adjourned.